Live from SABC studios in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. Welcome to this midweek edition of the Watchdog. My name is Vuyo Mvoko, and on the show this evening, how do we protect the dignity of domestic workers in an age where people freely and at times carelessly share often damaging information on social platforms?
But whatever you do must be done within the parameters of the law and within the parameters of the Constitution.
No light at the end of the runway as members of Parliament. Workers can't get answers about the real state of affairs at South African Airways. Those stories, subjects of our discussions on tonight's episode of The Watchdog, which starts right now. Now, all the people in the know were present. Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan, high-ranking departmental officials, as well as majority shareholders and senior management of the South African Airways. Hours later, Parliament's Watchdog Committee on Public Accounts was none the wiser about the goings-on at the airline. The minister says the sale of 51% of SAA to the Takatso Consortium is yet to be finalized. He again defended the envisaged deal, saying the fiscus can't afford to continue carrying the financial burden of the airline. And all of this, of course, happening on a day we heard about the resignation of one of the board members.
Gordhan, together with the management of SAA, appeared before Parliament's Standing Committee on Public Accounts. They faced tough questions from MPs about the SAA Takatso Consortium deal and about the resignation of Novik from the Takatso Consortium board.
Mr. Novik was a small and relatively minor partner in a consortium. Let's not overplay whatever he has to say. That's all I'm going to say. I mean, what happens within Takatso is their business. But just because he happens to be somebody who has experience somewhere in his past, as we all do in one respect or another, doesn't discredit everybody else.
Gordhan says some of the conditions of the deal are that there must be no political interference and that there will be no dependency on government to provide cash. In addition, Takatso Consortium will bring their own management team as well as operating capital. He told Scopa that Takatso will pay the money once the deal is finalized.
Takatso is not required to put any money into anything right now to do with SAA because there's no deal. The transaction is still in the process of receiving regulatory approvals. So why must it put money into something that it has nothing, no legal status in at this particular point in time? So the timeline, as you put it, to deliver the cash as far as the operating expenses is concerned starts on the day on which this part of the process ends and the deal has been consolidated.
Gordhan declined to reveal the price tag of the deal, citing a confidential disclosure agreement with the consortium.
That you cannot have an airline that is run by government with all the regulatory sluggishness that we go through, which hamstrings SAA vis-a-vis its competitors. For SAA to survive, it needs an agile structure. It needs to be managed by, like the minister said, by a management team that is not overburdened by political dynamics, decision-making.
Scopa says it wants the deal to be above reproach and not be tainted with corruption scandals.
We will not take a decision for you whether sell or don't sell. But whatever you do must be done within the parameters of the law and within the parameters of the Constitution, which amongst others calls for transparency.
SAA has more than a year operating after being under business rescue in 2019. Scopa says SAA has fewer aircraft flying compared to its competitors. Lula Mamatya, SABC News, Parliament.
Well, joining me now to reflect on some of the issues raised in that package, please welcome a member of Parliament serving in the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. Alf Lees joins us on the line. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Boyer. Thank you for having me.
Now, also part of this conversation, and here with me in studio is Ms. Zazi Nsibanyoni-Mugambi, who is the president of the South African Cabin Crew Association. Good evening to you, too.
Good evening, Boyer.
Just what you made of the little we played there and everything else that you've read and heard and seen since?
It's been a painful, painful experience for us, Boyer, because you know, from the beginning of this deal, we've been asking for transparency. We've been asking for a disclosure as to who the equity partner is, who bid for the airline, how much the airline was on the table for, what are the conditions. We've asked many, many questions, and we've received no answers. So there will be no transparency. Even it actually baffles us that Gideon Novick, for instance, would say there's no transparency, so he's walking out as a director, where this is what we've been saying all along. And he's just said basically everything is up to board. We're doing a due diligence that took 2 years, about 2 years of due diligence. So this whole deal seems to not be working out, and it's a great concern for us. I mean, as SACA and NUMSA, we have said a great deal about this. So we're worried. We're extremely worried, and we're worried about where Takato stands. And for the minister to say he does not have to disclose, this is the SOE. We need to know something about what's on the table. And we have people like Dodo, who were bidders that we found out at the tail end, that have gone to court and have said, listen, this bid is not above board, and we believe them.
Yeah.
Alf Lees, you as parliamentarians didn't get any answers either.
Yeah, that's my torch. That's a
Okay, we seem to be having a problem with Alf Lees's line. Hopefully, someone's going to be able to sort that out. But as I was asking him, I mean, you could see, I mean, the frustration on the Standing Accounts Committee's chairperson, and of course other members of Parliament who asked questions, was quite palpable. They are not getting answers either.
Yeah, so my question would be, what is their role? What is their purpose? Really, because they've become a toothless sort of a committee. We have written to Scopa and we've received no acknowledgement. And we would have thought, if you really want to know the ongoings from the people on the ground, the workers that are dealing with the day-to-day situation that is, you would have spoken to us, but they've simply ignored us. So we hear them. It's been the same talk shop for the last couple of years. The minister has come on and said, listen, I'm telling you nothing, and it's basically accepted from a public entity. I mean, if Scopa really wanted to get some information, I mean, they could sign NDAs. Things must be told. We need to understand what is happening. And the worst for us is that we have workers, 900 out of almost 5,000 workers that are still at SAA, that want to know what their future holds. They've been told Takato's coming, and now it seems like it's falling apart if you have directors walking out, because they can see what is headed their way. So for us it's highly problematic, not just for ourselves, but for the members that we represent.
Well, previously, I mean, when you've spoken, you have said as much that no one was talking to you, you didn't know what was going on. You mean over the in the last while, still no one has even come to say, listen, guys, you know you don't know anything because we haven't told you anything. Listen, at some point, we'll be able to come to you, but because there's still A, B, C, and D that still has to happen, we can't say anything right now. Not even that.
Not even that. And this is a serious concern. We've been told absolutely nothing. The last that we've actually interacted with this whole debacle is when we made submissions to the Competitions Commission. To date, the commission seems to be dragging its feet for whatever reason. But people must start to take account for what's happening. You cannot have a process continuing onto 3 years, 4 years in limbo. That means a call must be made. It's either the Takatso deal is scrapped. I heard the minister say that they can't put money if the deal is not complete. But how much are they supposed to put? As far as we know, the little we know is that it's 51 Rand. So of course, if it's 51 Rand and they're required to deal with the liability of the airline, they could make a plan to take over the airline, start making it profitable, bring the technical expertise, the management team, and let the airline continue.
Well, it says there's no deal yet.
Well, that's
no entity, or no one can put their money when there's no deal on the table.
How do you know, Vuyo?
No, I'm saying,
Yeah,
I mean, that's what he said.
Exactly my point, and I'm asking you like in a sarcastic way, because how do we test that? What we know for sure is there are other bidders on the table. Like I mentioned before, with Toto, they've said, we are a bidder, we had real money on the table, and our bid was not taken seriously. So we don't know how many bidders there are on the table. We know one, and if Takatso can't come to the party, we cannot keep dilly-dallying around this particular issue. We must take the next best party. There must be a complete disclosure. There's no such thing that a sale of an airline and the amount that is sold for is a secret. And the competition cannot take that and use it. We understand about the intricacies that you need to sort of protect for the competition. But the general truth around the deal is not a secret. It should not be a secret. And for me, it's smoke and mirrors, because I think we have a real problem in terms of the fact that it appears Takatso does not even have the money to put into SAA.
Alf Lees, I don't know what you made of what actually happened yesterday, but from, the package we played earlier from our colleague Lulama, it doesn't look like you as MPs got anything or any explanation as to where things are, what is really, what has happened, and what's going to happen going forward.
Yeah, thank you for you, and I apologize for the issue with the video. As we were starting the program, we have the other SOE problem, Eskom, and load shedding. So I'm sitting in the dark, but be that as it may, we've got a few batteries in the computer. Yeah, we didn't learn anything new yesterday, and really. We've been so frustrated over such a long time, starting from June last year, when the announcement was first made, to get this information. And the minister has steadfastly either obfuscated and refused to give us the information. And we've come to certain conclusions on our own, but the fact is we don't know. And it's surprisingly, Gideon Novik apparently doesn't know either a lot of the information, and yet he's supposed to be the main player, actually, in terms of running an airline. Harith Investments, or whatever they call themselves, who are the other shareholders in Takatso Aviation, have no, aren't they brought in Global and Novik to run the airline. So it's a bit rich for the minister to say that Novik actually is a minor partner. Well, actually, it might be financially, but in terms of the whole deal and the due diligence that must surely have been done, he must have played an important role in deciding that this particular company, Takatso Aviation, could take over SAA and run it. So very disappointing. What I did manage to get the committee to agree to was that we're going to get a legal opinion now from Parliamentary Legal Services to establish whether there is any legal support or reason for the minister and SAA, for that matter, to refuse to answer the questions and give the information that the scoper requires. And so that's now in process.
Now,
Yeah, for you.
let me start with the former. I mean, in the absence of answers, you saying that you were then forced to arrive at your own conclusions. I'm keen to know what those conclusions are or were.
Yes. Well, first of all, it's quite clear that this is a very, very nice deal for the buyers of the 51% of the shares. They're paying 51 Rand for 51% of the shares because the nominal value of the shares in the company is 100 Rand for 100%. So technically, 51% is worth 51 Rand in nominal value. But the fact is that you and I and all the taxpayers in South Africa, in terms of the deal, and this is some parts that have been made public, will be carrying all the liabilities. So the buyers, if you can call them that, I prefer to call them the recipients, the beneficiaries of gratuity from the taxpayer, are getting a completely debt-free airline with an incredibly strong brand, with properties, major properties in South Africa and properties around the world, in various places, with a team of employees, including the cabin crew, who are so well trained and are fantastic to fly with, a good team of pilots, although I hear now that there's a great deal of unhappiness and pilots are leaving SAA because they have better opportunities elsewhere, apparently. But it's a very good deal. It's got roots all over the world, and the buyers, or the people being given the airline, are paying 51 Rand for all that, and they're not taking over any of the liabilities. That's why, Vuyo, it's so important for us, particularly from a parliamentary oversight point of view, to understand the process that was followed to select Takatso Aviation in the first place, and the details of the agreement that was apparently entered into in February, according to the minister. Now, the other conclusion that I've been pushing for, and I finally managed to work it out yesterday with the unintended help of the minister, was that my questions were, I requested the operating profits or losses since the airline restarted in September 2021. That was refused. And so my question was, well, what cash are you using to keep the airline in the air, seeing as the Takatso deal hasn't come to fruition, and so Takatso haven't yet put in any money, and we hear from Mr. Novik, that they don't seem to even raise the 3 billion Rand that they need to put in. But so the minister then replied to me, no, they're using the 2 billion Rand in bailout that was appropriated as part of the 10.5 billion Rand. And then this is where he went slightly further than I think he intended, by saying that that money won't last forever, and therefore we need the additional investment, presumably the 3 billion from Takatso, to avoid any further requests from the fiscus. So what that tells me, for you, is that the airline has run for over a year now at a loss, and they've been using the 2 billion Rand to fund those losses. We still don't know whether the 2 billion Rand is all used up. I suspect that they're getting pretty close to running out of cash again. And so there's now a desperate need to get this deal going. But of course, my question to the minister was, well, what guarantees have you got in terms of this agreement that Takatso actually can raise the 3 billion Rand? The minister says, well, they signed the agreement, therefore they have to do what the agreement says. But that doesn't, lots of people sign agreements and then in the end aren't able to fulfill their side of the agreement, which means the agreement would then be cancelled and there might be damages and all sorts of other things. But the point is that when you want to buy a home for yourself, and you go to and find a seller and you enter into agreement, you'll find in that agreement that deal is always contingent on either raising a loan from a bank or someone standing guarantee. But before that property is transferred, the finances are put in place either upfront or at the point of transfer.
Okay.
Here we have a deal. There are no guarantees that the 3 billion is even available. Okay. Sorry for you.
Now, Zazi, have you gotten any intelligence from those? Of your members who are still, part of SAA, as it were, because from what Alf was saying clearly, well, he believes from what the minister said yesterday that the bailout actually went to keeping things going for now. Those who are still there, part of SAA, the what, 1,000 or so.
It's actually very terrible conditions, and Mr. Lees is quite correct. The working conditions are such that people are literally are struggling to survive. Pilots are leaving for greener pastures. Even the pilots that they try so hard to keep, pilots of color, because it's just not worth the money that they're paying. Cabin crews conditions have been reduced by 35%. They're struggling to make ends meet. We had wage, obviously we put a wage, we went through wage negotiations and we asked, can we see the financials? And they refused, because obviously there's a lot going on right now that they don't want to divulge. We even offered to have, an independent auditor come and look and, sign NDAs, but that was refused as well. So I don't think it's far from the truth. I think it's a crisis.
Now, there isn't even a sense, like from, say, maybe some of them, to say, look, we understand what they are going through. Maybe a lot of the certainty is what is, making the situation a bit difficult. But, there is a bit of a light at the end of a tunnel. We're positive that at some point, things will get better instead of getting worse.
No.
Not even that.
It's not even that.
We've been hearing that for years.
Yeah, and it's even worse that right now, SAA management has de-recognized all unions, by the way, because, we have become problematic. So they're even worse off, So members are really desperate. There's no light at the end of the tunnel. Obviously, workers want SAA to continue. Let's make that very clear. They don't want to lose their jobs. They want to be able to retain and feed their families, because they've seen what's happened to the 4,000 colleagues that are desperately looking for jobs. It's not a case of...
I don't know what you think of what this tweet says. Sugan says, this is a sad state of affairs for employees. They should just shut the entire company down and pay out severance pay. A new company can start with no baggage. That's my thoughts, I feel, for all these employees.
Ask the 4,000 that are unemployed right now, Vuyo. It's tough. There are no jobs out there. Obviously, to have SAA shut down also does nothing for the competition. You've seen a price to Cape Town, a ticket price to Cape Town. We need the competition in the sky. It is not that difficult to get. We've had the likes of Vuyani Chakana, which the minister didn't like, obviously, and was interfering. That's gone. Now we have the likes that a light of a technical partner with Gideon Novik, that's also gone. So it's
well, they've kept their shoulder. They haven't gotten rid of their shareholding.
One foot in, one foot out. Which is the point that Pravin Gordhan made. Yes, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. But I think he relinquished the directorship because he can see there's a problem, and to sort of paint a picture for what is coming, that is quite obvious that the Takatso deal is not going to take off, because if it was, there'd be some money put on the table. The ministers asked for surety for many. For Express at some point, he asked for surety for and money on the table. Why could that not be done for the Takatso deal?
Well, if I heard him correctly says, they'll bring their own operational capital. They'll be putting money into this thing, but because there's no deal,
No, I mean,
they can't bring money into something.
but
But
for your
they have-
Show me the
business.
money first.
Oh. Okay.
Sorry. No, I'm being rude here. My apologies. But the question really should be, will you show me the money?
But also, I mean, on just from what you were saying earlier, I mean, the point, your latter point that you made of what is not there in how you play your oversight role, that stops you from actually demanding, I mean, that this information be availed to you as a body of the legislature.
Well, you're absolutely right. So the next step.
In other words, why did you feel the need to still go and get some legal opinion?
Well, because you can't physically force the minister or anyone else to do what you're asking. So you need to go through these steps, but that legal opinion will be done in a few days. It's not like some legal process in the High Court or something like that. So it's a relatively short thing, but we've, in a sense, already got the legal opinion because we had a similar problem with the State Security Agency, which last week refused to come attend a meeting of SCOPA to discuss the vetting
And this was
official.
and this was an issue today as well. So it looks like, I mean, but anyway,
No,
okay,
but the
go
point is
on.
that- So we now are going to invoke the authority to subpoena. So once if just deal with the State Security Agency, if they refuse again, they will be subpoenaed. And the same process will be followed with the Public Enterprises Minister and SAA. And so we'll get it. There's given the legal opinion we got this morning, there's no legal reason for any of these state entities to refuse to give us information. And in fact, anyone in South Africa, unless they have a legal reason, has to come to Parliament and give us the information. So it's very frustrating. I found it frustrating that we've not waited, but we've gone through a year of kind of allowing this process to go ahead. But fortunately, the committee supported me yesterday and supported me again this morning. And so we will now pretty quickly get to the point where there's, unfortunately, either compliance or a confrontation. I do hope it's compliance.
Well,
And I do hope, that I just want to reinforce what Zazi said just now. Zazi, please call me Alf. I really, or Mazamban, or just don't call me late for dinner. No one wants to see this airline collapse, but unless it is dealt with in a professional and market-related way, then it must be shut down. So we want it to succeed. There's a need for, as Zazi says, for the seats in the industry.
okay.
I fly on a regular basis. We need the airline, but we do need it to be competitive and not to be a burden on the taxpayer.
Well, we all hope that indeed is the outcome. But we're going to leave it there for now. But food for thought for you, Alf, as well. I mean, a Zanian man reminding us that SAA refused to submit financials for 2 consecutive years to SCOPA before the Takatso deal was even announced. So there is also that history, which doesn't give a lot of people a great deal of hope. But we're going to leave it there for tonight. Let me thank both of you for agreeing to come on. Of course, we'll keep watching this story as it continues to unfold. But after the break, do madams feel they are too important to protect the dignity of domestic workers? Now, do madams feel they are too important to protect the dignity of domestic workers? That's the question we are asking this evening, following what for some people, including myself, was a rather peculiar set of tweets by social media influencer and reality TV star Faith Ngedze. Now, we're not calling out Faith Ngedze, just to be clear, but the series of tweets and the replies to them were what gave rise to a thought that maybe this is something we should look into. Considering also, as many of you will know, I mean, over the years, there have been conversations, debates, some would say, around madams, black madams in particular. But let's look at what Faith wrote on her timeline, which, as I say, gave rise to this conversation. Just was saying, so we just hired her without meeting her, our mistake. We were told that she was 40, but she arrived. I found out that she's actually 50, and she gave me a whole explanation about her ID faults. Okay, fine. I let it slide. Time went on, and Auntie is always complaining about being sick. Therefore, can she rest? Okay, cool. My mom would give her meds, and we obviously didn't mind until it started happening a lot. I told her that when Ubaba has a meeting at home, can she please offer guests something to drink? And she gave off that vibe and told me that she doesn't know how to make tea and coffee, so I taught her. That day I left. When I came back, she expressed how tired she was. I asked why, and she said that she's been serving Ubaba and guests the whole day. Later, I asked my husband, and he said she only brought drinks once. Fast forward, she chose to never offer a guest something to drink. I let it slide and decided I'll just do it. Now let's talk about this vibe that she gives off. Now when Ubaba asks her to do something, she does it with such optimism. But when I ask her, she drags her feet. And literally looks like she could say no. She even goes as far as complaining about her knees and expresses how she's so terrified of the stairs. Yesterday when I was livid, okay? I'm running so late for work and I can't seem to find the top I want to wear, but the conversation of course goes on. Let's not just bore you with these details, but here are some of the questions one was asking oneself upon reading all this stuff, all this detail going out there. Trust me, I've seen worse where people complain, you know, about their aunties, what they do, what they can't do, and so on. And the reason I felt this time around that maybe it's something we need to look into, because this person is an influencer. Now, as the name suggests, that's what she does. She influences, or at least tries to influence other people, you and I, to do certain things, or maybe not do other things. So in her position, she does wield, you know, a great deal of power. And just like me, because of the job that I do, a lot of people read the things I say, listen to my views and my opinions. Now, to cut a long story short, what happened there after all those tweets I read and more, Auntie, as she calls her, resigned after, I don't know whether she read or heard about the twist, but Madam vows that she never showed the tweets, nor did she ever mention her by name, so she remains anonymous. Now, that's what I want to canvass with my guests who are in a studio. Pinkima Shane is the founder and president of the United Domestic Workers of South Africa. Sfiso Hlope is a strategist specializing in social media at a company called Omni-Channel. Good evening to both of you, and thank you so much for your time.
Good evening. Thank you for inviting us.
Let me start with you, Sfiso. I mean, in this situation, what just from those tweets, what immediately came to your mind?
It goes back to the conversation of the old saying, with great power comes great responsibility. So this is, here we've got an influencer who's got a whole lot of social capital. I mean, when you look at just in 2021, we've had about an uptake of 13% of people going onto social media. When you bring it down to numbers, it's like half the world, because just this week we've had about 8 billion people in the world that's confirmed. So that means that, you know, anything that you could put on social media is viral. It could play into the hands of, you know, cancel culture, which I could argue is very flawed, because people listen to the loudest voice in the room, which is not necessarily the right voice, because most of it's not founded by great facts. So you've got an influencer who brings the world into her life, you know, gives her perspective of events, but you've also got another individual who doesn't necessarily have that kind of agency, and people won't listen to it as much as they would listen to her. But one could also argue, you know, I hate to play devil's advocate, but one could also argue that you've also got individuals. Influencers are always seen as not actual human beings, like celebrities. You know, I mean, I see the rumors that are going around with Cristiano Ronaldo. You know, everybody has speculations about his interview that hasn't happened yet. You know, it hasn't aired. So with that, you've got influencers who use social media as almost it's their life. You know, their social capital. Their fans are their people, you know, so they engage with them, they bring them into their lives. I mean, she's a reality TV star, so she brings them into their world. So I think also as a proactive strategy, she could have looked at it in a way that because when you read all the tweets, you could see that this relationship had gone astray. It was only going to land up in one place where she probably leaves and then could probably go to the media. And social media likes to see giants fall as well, you know, so she could be robbed of the narrative because, you know, sensationalization is what sells. So, you know, the lady could then go to, you know, newspapers, give her narrative, and people were not going to listen to Faith and Getsi because, you know, that's how social media or socialites, you know, they don't have hearts, they're not humans and whatnot. So that would be me playing devil's advocate, but you know, I would commend her a little bit for taking a little bit of accountability, because she should have worn the hats of an employer and not put out, you know, any information about her employee, you know, because there are channels and ways of communicating. So I think the whole situation as a whole is just unfortunate, and I really hope she has learned from it. But again, you know, with great power comes great responsibility. So she needs to go back to the drawing board, look at how that affects her, because some brands might be skeptical with moving away, because, you know, just moving away from a particular influencer or somebody who's carrying your brand is dangerous, because it could be unfounded. You know, we've seen it with that particular television host who's been reinstated. So, but other brands don't necessarily, you know, they don't deal well with any negative information, so they'll just pull away.
I think, I mean, among the first things she says is, well, she admits that they didn't do the basics, which she later says is probably the reason they are where they are with the domestic worker.
I think as an employer, it was her responsibility to sit down with the domestic worker. And even if she had those issues with the domestic worker, she was supposed to speak with her. We are hearing her side of story of everything that she was doing. A 50-year-old unable to make tea. I've never heard of such. So what's happening here, she knew that she's a celebrity and she's got many followers, and they're going to take her side. I was reading the responses from the tweets, what they were saying about that domestic worker. They were so mean, others, they were saying, just fire her, just like that.
In fact, that's what I wanted to go to. Those replies, perhaps more than anything else, were what kind of were the things that struck me. But I just wanted to take it, if you don't mind, like sort of step by step. Like among her first tweets, in her first tweets, she says that she gives us a sense of the process that she followed, you know, that led to them hiring her. Just your thoughts on that. Here, person, they didn't meet, they didn't verify anything, they didn't do any checks, they took their word for it, and now let's just say, forget for a second, like the latter part, which you just got into now, which we are going to get into, you know, just the first part. Is that the way to go? Is that how you do it, or you're supposed to do it?
That's how some employers are doing it. She was supposed to speak with the domestic worker, to hire somebody to take care of your house, to look after your child or children. As I said, comes with great responsibility. You have to sit down and have some talks. This is an intimate relationship. I always tell domestic workers to have a strong relationship with their employers, drawing the line knowing that they are domestic workers and these are employers, but they must have a good relationship. They should know each other. They should, even at the time she noticed that Auntie was acting weird, she should have sit Auntie down and said, Auntie, I didn't know who you are, and I am this celebrity, so this is what I don't like. Where do you come from? Whatever. She should have spoken with Auntie before taking Auntie to Twitter.
And that covers herself as well, because where there's a dispute, Auntie says, well, I have a job here, and there's nothing you are going to do. So it does, I mean, going through that process does protect it, doesn't it?
It definitely it does. That's why so many employers don't even have a work contract for domestic workers, because they take them so light and with so much disrespect that they will hire and fire as they want. Yeah, maybe Auntie was on the way to be fired. That's what happened here. But the fact remains that she should have spoken with Auntie. She should have known where Auntie comes from. She should have asked Auntie about her family and her children. Maybe she could have
maybe references as well.
Yes,
where did you work before?
Yes, and build a relationship with Auntie and hear from other employers, like you're saying, the references to hear from other employers how Auntie was as a domestic worker there or as a nanny.
But all of that said, she still doesn't deserve what we saw here.
She doesn't deserve it. No domestic worker deserves this. This is a disrespect and shows how much the dignity of domestic workers is taken by some employers using their power over domestic workers, that they are employees. And forgetting that domestic workers, by picking panties on the floor, are not less human than them.
What do you advise your clients when, you know, obviously, I mean, the relations here and the power relations are, I mean, she's in a very powerful position and can go out there, as you were saying earlier, put her side of the story without her fans or the people she influences having the advantage or privilege of knowing the other side of the story. Now, even if Auntie is not in a position, you know, to do that, I would imagine you do advise your clients and say, don't take advantage of the situation because of those power relations. It's just...
I think it goes back to understanding your power, because sometimes people become oblivious to it because they get married to the bad part of it, you know, and they go into almost a bubble of being empathetic or sympathetic to themselves or feeling sorry for them and being like, oh, being the superstar is so hard, but they forget, they think the world, they need to speak their truth all the time and put their narrative out there. I think it goes back to just, you know, never put out content out of emotion. You know, so if you feel disgruntled, that is something that I would advise any influencer that I work with, and just to never put something out. You know, sometimes you might feel like it is protecting yourself, but it will do more harm than damage, you know, if not to yourself, to the other party. So I think just her sitting, reflecting on it, I'm sure it'll be a good learning curve for her.
I mean, I know you would not have done any research on this, but just from anecdotal, you know, evidence and from what you hear people saying and how they respond to these kinds of things, do you think people kind of tend to lean more towards like sympathizing or empathizing with the celebrity or powerful people, or I mean, you know, or do you often find that there are people, a lot of people actually say, look, you brought this upon yourself, or you are the one we should be asking questions or putting questions to?
I think social media, the way it is structured, a large portion of people on social media are people with like faceless human beings, so they don't necessarily use their real names, they use aliases, and a lot of them almost use it as a medium to channel, I guess, inner evil, because a lot of people on social, people love drama, people love pushing a negative agenda, and people love seeing the downfall of other people. So if perhaps maybe Faith could have put this out as I'm trying to hear from you guys and get sound advice, but a lot of the people would have milked the opportunity to, belittle and say all these bad things to this poor woman who, probably works hard and, also is trying to provide for her kids and had no intention of disgruntling her employer. I don't think anybody intentionally goes out to, displease the employer. So a lot of people, social media polarizes to a negative agenda. So I think, she should have seen that and, tried to understand what it would do to the next person, because as much as her argument was, I didn't mention her name or I didn't mention anything that identifies her, you're a social media influencer, you're a celebrity, through social engineering or just social listening, people will find out who that person is, if they really want to, and use it to, degrade her. And also, now that she's on, put on, quote unquote, on blast on social media, what that would do is that it will also influence the next employer, because what cancel culture and social media culture does is that the people that genuinely know the person personally won't be affected by it, but it's all the people that don't know her yet. They will have preconceived ideas as to how she works, and that will do a whole lot of damage to her future endeavors when it comes to finding work.
This conversation, as I said earlier, is not about Faith Mgetsi. It's about the lived experiences of domestic workers. We're just using, this to get into the bigger issues, which was the reason why you formed your organization in the first place. The plight of domestic workers, what they are subjected to.
That's true. Domestic workers are subjected to different forms of harassment and abuse from employers. Many of them are suffering in silence, protecting their work because they need that work for their children. Some of them are single parents, others are only the breadwinner that the children are looking at. And we are talking about the women who leave their own children to bring themselves up while they are bringing other women's children to make a living. So they are usually used to this abuse and harassment, and sometimes they even get depressed. I'm just imagining what Auntie is going through now, because even if the Auntie's name was not mentioned, Auntie, when she realized that she's working for a celebrity, she told her family, she told her friends and people that, look at my madam. I can also be happy and say, look at my madam, look how beautiful and young my madam is. And now all those people are seeing madam on Twitter saying this about me. She might be depressed and sick, and many domestic workers are working with depression and they don't know that they are on depression. And some employers can see that their domestic workers are not happy, but they are doing nothing. Even with their children, when they get home, they are grumpy, they are not well with their children because of the stress and abuse that they go through from the hands of their employers.
And is the movement, whether it's on the legislative front or the implementation of the laws that we already have, that is improving, the lives of or lived experiences of domestic workers?
It is improving, because the problems that I get from other domestic workers, I have a domestic worker whose employer wanted to sleep with. She approached the madam that your husband wants to sleep with me. She was dismissed immediately and was paid for the days that she worked. I'm talking about the black madam. So our members, I don't regularly have problems with the domestic workers who are members of Futwasa. Most of the problems that we gather from the domestic workers who are not organized. It's very unfortunate that many domestic workers are not unionized. They don't know even about the unions. They are not organized. They go through all forms of abuse, harassment, exploitation, bad working conditions, and they are dying alone there behind the closed doors of their employers. But as movement, if we find domestic workers who are in need of us, like Auntie, if Auntie can come to us, we can speak with Auntie. We can even approach CCMA for a constructive dismissal, because this is a case. case of a constructive dismissal through what she went through, through what she said about her on social media. And the friend was advising her to pay her for 2 months and just dismiss her.
And people do lose such cases, even though they may think that they are on the right.
It's possible.
Does happen.
It happens.
I'm sorry, I can't get tired of that advice that you gave, even if it's just, for doing the right thing, that every person should remember the power that they hold, the influence that they have, and not abuse it wittingly or not.
I think, it's even outside the context of being an influencer or, as an individual, it understanding your disposition in society or in any, working relationship or personal relationship, it's important for somebody to understand where they stand, their actions and their implications on the next person, because what that does is that, it comes with EQ, and understanding how you affect the next person, and having control of that and being able also helps you to be able to navigate people. There is a matrix or it's I forgot the word of it, but it's almost something that I had learned at my previous employment, where it's called the color code. And if you understand your personality, understanding the next person, and each person belongs to a different color code. So if you understand the color code of the next person, you almost know how to engage them to get the result that you want, And it's the same even with social media. Some people know that they need to stir up a whole lot of drama in order for them to gain traction. Some people know how to turn the narrative in their favor and be popular without necessarily pushing negative agendas. But I think it goes understanding power, So,
and before you press that send button, think about the implications it may have on the next person. Thanks to both of you for coming through.
Thank you.
Hardly scratched the surface of this conversation, but I'm glad we at least put it out there.
Thank you.
Well, that's all we had for you this evening. Do join us again tomorrow evening, same time. Have a good night.